Hello everyone, welcome to the new Holistic Locational Astrology Masterclass 2021 version. I really want this to be a great class, so I've added 7 days to the class, or seven classes to the class, which would make it 19 weeks rather than 12. That's the plan at this point. And I'm adding 7 days or classes because I want to teach more of the foundations of holistic astrology, right? Which is how I just sort of brand the thing that I'm doing at this point. And I'm trying to start a conversation, and it's a humble and curious sort of conversation, you know. Holistic astrology has a lot to do with being flexible, being open, being curious, being humble, and trying to integrate different ideas whenever it makes sense to do so. Holistic astrology, as I practice it, of course, is a blend of Western and Vedic and locational astrology. And the Western astrology I practice is, most of my experience in Western is in modern Western astrology. So I started when I was pretty young, senior in high school, and got turned on to astrology because my mom told me some stuff about my chart one night. And I was like, how do you know that stuff? It's crazy. So I got into it, and I was around a lot of cool influences in modern astrology. Went to the Metro Atlanta Astrological Society and met a lot of my great teachers there. One of them I want to honor real quick is a man named Stefan Vanel, who passed away recently. He turned me on to a lot of beautiful things, so I'll try to mention him throughout this class. He had a huge impact on me, so he was a wonderful guy, and I'm sad. Those people you think are going to be around for a while, they aren't always, right? So this was the chart of the moment. It's always fun to pick a day to start your class and all that. And I did it on a Thursday, even though the class is on a Wednesday. Just because it's night, I thought this was very interesting. The moon is actually at the exaltation degree of Mercury. That's the middle of Virgo, 15 Virgo. 15 Virgo is the middle of Virgo is a very mercurial place. The people who have planets in the middle of Virgo, I bet you a lot of you do, because you're attracted to not only astrology, but my class where I like a lot of precise numbers too. Those people are really curious. They love to learn. They love to ask all the questions, pick through all the details. They can be kind of picky, of course, but yeah, that is the exaltation degree of Mercury. So I have used that degree before, like when I published one of my novels, I used it. So it's a neat degree for Mercury stuff, and even though Mars here is in Cancer, which is the fall for Mars, there is reception here, which is that Mars is in Cancer, which is ruled by the Moon and aspected by the Moon, while the Moon's over here. You never find a perfect electional chart. Honestly, here's what you can learn from me. Hopefully not that the class would not go well, but I would normally never start a major thing near an eclipse. I've seen astrologers think they have good electional charts because it looks in the chart like it's a nice chart, but it is really risky to do things around eclipses. So that is really the risk about starting a class at a time like this, is it's just not an auspicious time to start something, actually. But life happens too, and you gotta work and you gotta do your stuff, and just kind of found the best time that I could. Didn't want to put this off longer, so here we are. So we can come back and look at this later. Kind of interesting right now, Uranus is in a nearly virtually perfect square to my sun in Leo, so that's kind of a different one. And so here we are. So there is a chat feature here in GoToMeeting, and I try to check that every once in a while. So I'm going to say hi here in the chat one more time. And you guys can definitely toss questions in there, and I may get on a roll and not get back to it for a minute, but I do my best to try to check in every once in a while. So that's good. Okay, so everyone has what they need as far as GoToMeeting. You're seeing my screen live, and if GoToMeeting is not big enough on your screen right now, you can enlarge it. There's a button, something that looks like a kind of an enlarge button. It might be the 2 white arrows, and so you can make that bigger. So these first 7 weeks, I hope you will not be disappointed in the sense that I'm not going straight into nothing but locational astrology. In the past, I have more or less done that, but I'm really serious about this class, and I want it to be really good. And I want it to be as thorough as I can. And again, locational astrology is cool because it's like a higher application in a way of the basics. You have to understand a lot of the basics of astrology and the intricacies of just astrology. It's another way to kind of apply that. So, it makes a lot of sense, I think, to start with the beginning. And as I am now talking about holistic astrology as a thing, I want to, give you guys some of the foundations, some of the concepts and the important pieces. So today the goal, in addition to talking about some bigger topics around ethics, around literally what is astrology, and how does that relate to a higher power? We're going to get into the houses quite a bit here today too. So that's the first unit we're going to get into, and I chose the houses first because the houses are super useful in holistic locational astrology. Super useful. They're amazingly useful, and not in ways that you might expect or think. In fact, it's not in a way that I would have expected or thought when I got into this. I've learned things about how to use the houses in locational astrology that I didn't know. No one taught me. I literally learned it by watching charts, by teaching classes, just working with people, and some things started to emerge from that work. So the first question of the night is, what is astrology? And it's the kind of question that, I used to never really concern myself a whole lot with. How does this work? It's a very natural question. It's interesting, right? But I was someone who never cared a whole lot about how it works. I just cared that it worked, I didn't need to understand the mechanism for astrology if it was helping me understand myself and people around me and so on and so forth. But I find that question more and more interesting. And I think it's fun to contemplate. So a lot of what you'll see from me, I have Venus in Virgo in tropical. And so I like a lot of the precision, the detail. Usually when people see me do astrology for all, they're like, you got some Virgo in you, don't you? So there'll be a lot of that. But we're going to start with kind of the opposite, more of a Pisces thing here, more of a big picture. What are we doing here? I'm going to go back to, I'm sure a lot of you guys know Chris Brennan, and he used to have this MySpace forum that he was kind of the moderator of. And so a bunch of us back in the old days, this is early 2000s, maybe, I don't know, in the first decade in this century, we used to have fun debates and talk about all these things, and I was, always passionate about these kind of subjects. So at one point I put forward this idea that there's some kind of, and I called it at the time like a metaphysical, in other words, I don't know what it is, causality, but it's beyond something that might have any physical observable thing. In other words, what I was saying at one point was, this is what astrology shows us is so powerful, so amazing, so detailed, and so complex that, for example, back then you'd hear people say astrology worked according to synchronicity or something like that. And that is certainly, in my opinion, not even close to being a decent answer to how astrology works. If you look at how Carl Jung talked about synchronicity, I think he had an example of, working with a client and then they see something outside like a butterfly or a bird or something. It's a meaningful coincidence, right? It's a cool coincidence. Astrology does not work that way. It doesn't work that way. Anyone who's seen an ephemeris knows it doesn't work that way. Ephemerises don't just appear like a butterfly, right? They map out as precisely as we can, where are the planets at all times? Where's the moon? Where's the sun? It's a massive subject. And when you start to think about the fact that theoretically, right, according to what we're doing here with astrology, every single person, to begin with, their lives are so intricately woven into all of these complex, amazing, so many varied approaches to astrology. You can read cycles with lots of different orientations, Western and Vedic and whatever. You can read things from so many different angles in astrology. And so over time, it really occurs to me that we are indeed the blind men touching the elephant in different parts. And I think we each start to have our own conversation in a way with the heavens, if you will. And as we're having that conversation, we develop our own relationship to it. And when you have a personal relationship, let's say to God, let's say it was religion we were talking about. And I'm not comparing astrology exactly to religion, but I think there's some interesting points to note here. If you are really having a deep conversation with God, it ultimately becomes a bit of a religious thing, and you can become kind of fanatical and think that the way that you see it is the right way and stuff like that, because it's such a personal, powerful, oh my God, this is real for me kind of experience. So astrologers are ridiculous, and what a gathering of astrologers is called a disagreement, I think, and it's because it's just like religion. You just have someone from this religion arguing with this religion, and they're all touching part of the truth. They're touching this elephant that we'll call God, or the great mystery. And you're touching the tusk or the tail, and it's quite different, right, depending on what you're touching. So we have this beautiful thing, right? We each get to have literally, and we don't think about this enough. When we think about astrology, we are looking at the heavens, and our mind can't grasp how vast that is. I don't think there's any way we can even come close to grasping how vast that is. So what is it we're really looking at? We are looking to something that is vaster, far, far vaster than our mind can conceive. And it's borne out in ways that, and some of you are relatively new to astrology. I've been doing it professionally about 27 years now. I did my first reading when I was a freshman in college, and it was a long time ago. And the conversation, that you start to have is personal to you, and it's important to respect that someone else has a different conversation with God, so to speak. Now, that metaphysical causality idea that I was sort of saying, for lack of a more pleasant-sounding, efficient term, was simply the idea that it's not synchronicity. It's not this light thing. We are so interwoven into the movements of the planets that they might as well be causing it. And I'm not saying I understand causality here, but it's so profound. Like, right now, Saturn is opposite my Sun and my Mercury. Okay, I have the Sun at 11 Leo tropical, Mercury's 15 Leo tropical. Saturn is stationing here. Where's our old friend Saturn? And also, try never to speak too ill of the planets. They will kick your butt if you do. So great Saturn here. So he's stationing here, smack dab in the middle of, the midpoint of my Sun, Mercury. It's opposite that. So if I'm your client, right, there is no doubt at all that is a meaningful transit. And there will be a pressure in that person's life at that time to deal with something that maybe they haven't dealt with, or to step up in some way, right? Not every opposition is made equal, right? So Saturn is in Aquarius right now. He is dignified. My Sun is in Leo. That's a position in my chart that's dignified. So when you have a dignified planet opposing a dignified planet, the results can be a lot better. So for example, I'm teaching a class on astrology. It's kind of a big deal for me. And so this is Saturn holding my feet to that fire and saying, this is that thing that you are to do. So that's serious, right? And it's not just, that's not probably the only thing going on for me, but that that's a big deal, right? And you can predict that years ahead. You can predict it, theoretically, you could have looked at my chart when I was a baby and said, well, when you're 45, blah, blah, blah. And that's something that's just, again, it's almost like it might as well be caused. It's like what is caused is that there's going to be something at that time. So now the language I tend to use is, it's a mirror. It's very simple. And I think it's kind of an elegant way to put it, that we are simply looking at a mirror all the time. Now, one thing about a mirror, if it's just a working mirror, it's always reflecting you. It's always reflecting reality. It's always reflecting what is in front of it. Astrology never fails to do that. It never fails to reflect very significant things about the thing it is inquiring into. It's kind of amazing. But this is what we have. We have a mirror made up of movements of planetary bodies, moon, sun, these things that are vaster and larger and more amazing than our minds are probably even capable of grasping. And somehow every creature, every business, every nation, everything that starts in time on this planet is absolutely tied to this as a pure reflection of it. It's a mirror. The thing is, a mirror in that sense doesn't cause anything. It's a reflection of it. So, I don't know the answer to that kind of thing. We're just sort of speculating. But recently I've considered, okay, to consider the vastness of this subject, and that every single creature, as far as we know, and I don't know if a tree falls in the forest and no one was around to hear it, I don't know if it makes a sound or not, but as long as we're doing this astrology and we're all tied into it, and then you see these minute little things like daily transits and all these little tiny little things that change all the time. Once you take that in for years and years and years, and it always blows your mind, honestly, at this point, it makes more sense to me to say that I am looking to something divine in the heavens. Physically about as vast and divine, as we might conceive. And we're trying to have a conversation almost with that. I wonder sometimes if it's like, let's say you believe in a higher power. A higher power is not going to show up to your door in a top hat and tell you everything you need to know about your life. Life isn't supposed to be that easy. We're supposed to kind of work at figuring some stuff out and trying to understand ourselves. So this is a gift. And that is actually, I believe, one of the ways that one of my teachers, Hilarion, who is a channeled source from under the name Maurice B. Cook, the guy channeled it in the 80s. I'm actually taking over, if anyone knows that series, I'm taking over the responsibility of putting all that into ebook and putting it out there. It's a series that really influenced me an awful lot. And Hilarion says that astrology is a gift that allows us to understand ourselves. Kind of like if you were getting, little SMS, little messages from somewhere where you can't quite get the full conversation with the thing on the other side, but you can get all these great symbols that if you work at it and if you, do your best, you can get some understanding from that. So to me at this point, and I think part of the practical benefit of this contemplation is to recognize that perhaps we are dealing with a kind of divine revelation, a way of communing with the heavens, all that is, and understanding our place. It's when we consider that this may be incredibly sacred, then we have a different responsibility. There's a different ethic when you are attempting, and this is, we have quite a task because we are attempting to translate essentially this, as far as I'm concerned, divine revelation in the heavens at every moment. We're attempting to translate that for people and charge money for it, which is, we don't normally think of priests doing that sort of thing. I'm not saying we're priests. But I am saying I think we're more like priests than I used to think we are. That there is this opportunity, which can only be met with some kind of humility, if it's to be at all successful, of communing with this great thing and communicating it to another person in a way that can be compassionate and sort of beneficial for them. Stefan Vanel, my teacher who passed away, he would begin every reading with a prayer. He would hold the person's hand and say, I hope that this reading is beneficial to you. He would set an intention right away and be clear and say it out loud. Something I used to do, which now that I'm saying it, I think I'm going to do this again, because I don't like to say things I don't actually do myself. But I used to do this a lot, so I feel like I can say this. Back in the day, when I was an early 20-something, whatever, astrologer, I would always start, and I used to work with people in person before the internet. And so I'd work with people in person, and I would always start with a meditation. I just wanted to sit in silence with that person and get centered and sort of pray, meditate. I would visualize, light in the room, coming from my throat, connecting with something divine so that it can use my throat essentially to speak. And see that and know that. Know that in the room there is this golden energy, let's say, this golden light that, if you believe in whatever you believe in, guides, angels, Buddhas, whatever, that's there. Call that in if you want. There's something incredibly powerful about centering yourself, about having intention, about praying. And on that note, typically I start a class like this with a little chanting, and we'll go ahead and I'll just do that now. I'm a big Ganesh fan. I believe you can see Ganesh over my corner, over my shoulder here. So this is going to be a mantra that honors Ganesh. And why are we doing that? So Ganesh, among other things, does have connections with astrology. He's sort of the lord of the categories. So he's a good patron saint for astrologers, And then he's, of course, famously the remover of obstacles. And, everything in life can have an obstacle, right? We're not in control of anything, man. I mean, we could all be gone in a second. There's no guarantee of anything. You never want to go into something just assuming it's all going to go according to plan, right? So in the Hindu tradition, they typically will chant to Ganesh before undertaking any major enterprise. He's the first thing in the door. You ask Ganesh for his blessing first, and then you go forward. Let me just do that a little bit. The Om is really the sound connecting us to the oneness of everything. Om Nama is a kind of a salutation, kind of a bowing. So the Ganesh part is the Gum is kind of a seed syllable for Ganesh, and Ganapataye refers to Ganesh. So it's Om, right? We're reconnecting with the oneness in everything. Gum Ganapataye, we're talking about Ganesh, and Namaha. We're bowing, we're honoring really the divine, right? Hinduism has, a bazillion gods because they don't really care what the form of God is that you worship. Just find one that works for you, that opens your heart, right? That gets you somewhere. So yeah, Ganesh has always done that for me. I don't know, maybe I just like elephants. I don't know. So I'm just going to chant a little bit. And again, this I should have done this at the very beginning, but I think it's appropriate enough right now. And if you ever chant, tune into your heart, open, surrender, throw yourself at the feet of God. Om Gam Ganapataye Namaha. 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 And I pray that this class will be a great benefit to you. So here we are, interpreting perhaps these coded messages from something on the other side that can't speak to us directly. Just appreciate maybe that you get to do that, right? You get to look up at the heavens and ask that big cosmic mirror for some truth, right? Some clarity. There's nothing that's not spiritual. If you get deep into any kind of mysticism, everything is one. There's no separation to anything. So because of that profound oneness, you can find the divine just about anywhere. And astrology is a perfectly good path to find that. It encourages a great deal of growth in you because it will always remind you of some of your own failings and so on. So I do believe this is a very sacred subject, and I want to kind of couch some of the ethical conversation in that way, that we are attempting to take something that is almost like a divine sort of revelation, something that should be honored and used very carefully and never used for just sort of self-aggrandizement and personal gain and that sort of business. This is something we're meant to use to benefit others, right? To benefit ourselves, benefit others, gain insight. And that's very important, right? Just with anything, of course, if you have that kind intention, it makes a huge difference. I think one of the more interesting truths I've seen about astrology over all the years is that generally people who are operating on some higher level of consciousness, they do a lot better with their charts. Like even if they have the same transit as someone else, it might not really affect them a whole lot. Like it will if it's a huge transit. You will know that something's going on, but the outcome might not. It will be quite different than it might be for someone else. And so you'll see people that are generally in lives of service, right? A lot of that happens in the 12th house, in the 6th house also. But you have people who are really helping people, like really truly showing up in a divine way, in the sense of like getting out of the way, letting the divine work, being the hands of something greater than yourself. People who do a lot of that, they'll generally do better in a lot of ways in life. They will often have very difficult lives, especially in the early part of their life too, because they'll have a lot of, let's say, things in the 12th house, for example. That might be something that you find in those charts. And it's not an easy thing, right? So a lot of times astrology will reveal to you that the gifts that you have are intimately tied to the greatest challenges you've ever had. And not in a way that you might not even know, like, or you might not think to draw that line between those two things. But the astrology will help you to do that.